Namaskar. On behalf of Council for International Economic Understanding, CIEU, I, Raman Agarwal, welcome you to this talk series on growth capital. Friends, today we are going to talk about one of the very important sectors of Indian economy, a sector which has been in existence perhaps as old as the banking system and has contributed significantly to the economic growth of the country. I'm talking about the non-banking finance companies, that is the NBFCs. And we are going to talk about the N, that is the norms or the regulation, B, the background or the history, F as the future or the road ahead, and C as the challenges faced. So NBFC of the NBFC sector today. And we are extremely fortunate to have with us a man who is undoubtedly the most credible and the most respected voice of the sector, a person who I can safely say seen it all from the various stages. So friends, we are happy to be joined by Mr. T.T. Srinivasa Raghavan, Managing Director of Sundaram Finance Limited. Welcome, sir, to the show. And
Namaste.
thank you so much for joining us and sparing your time. As I said, sir, I think having known you personally for so long, I think you truly have seen the sector, the various nuances, the ups and downs. So to begin with, as we said, the regulatory regime or the norms. So do you think that the regulatory system as it evolved since 1997 till date, has it really kept pace with the demand of the market, or has it been more a knee-jerk kind of a reactions?
Of time, what I would say is a lot of the regulatory changes that have happened in the last 20, 22 years are perhaps relevant to the times that we live in. However, in terms of keeping pace, I think what at a very broad level I would say is that some of the regulation has sort of blindly borrowed from what's happened in the West. And in that sense, it has ignored some of the uniquely Indian characteristics of regulation. Because India is, as all of us know, a very diverse economy, a very complex economy. And therefore, to just lift out regulation from what happens in the West, to my mind, has sometimes not been the most appropriate.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And so often we see, whenever there is an episode or there is a failure, and I think failures are there in every businesses, and so have happened in the NBFC sector. We often see people talking about tightening of further regulation. Is tightening the answer to check failures?
No, I don't think tightening alone will do the job, because you can have all the regulations in the world, and there, as you say, there will still be failures. And it's not just in India. We've seen failures in the banking system
Yes.
across the world and in India. So just more regulation to me is not the answer. It's equally about supervision. It's also equally about incentivizing right behavior. One way to go is to say we will punish bad behavior, but what are we doing to incentivize good behavior? So I think it's oversimplifying the thing by saying we will regulate more, because the more you regulate, the more you're going to kill entrepreneurial spirit, the more you're going to kill creativity in terms of discovering new ways of doing business. So more regulation alone, to my mind, is not the answer.
And coupled with this is often a discussion and a debate that happens is that people talk about the so-called regulatory arbitrage between banks and NBFCs, and often it is argued that NBFCs should also be regulated like banks. Your views on this, sir?
No, I think, Raman, again, if you go back to the fundamentals of our business, see, NBFC is a newfangled term which has come about in the last 20 or 25 years. Prior to that, you had hire purchase companies, right? That's what we were all called. When I started off in the business, we were called hire purchase companies, right? There wasn't this negativism of non something,
Right.
which itself to me is a problem. But
Right.
if you looked at the hire purchase companies of old, and the businesses that they did, they were completely retail, right, in the nature of their business. So the risks were completely diversified risks, and the segments of the population which they addressed, was that segment of the population which nobody else would go to,
Mm,
right?
mm,
From there, today, it's everything and anything which is not a bank has become NBFC.
absolutely.
So to talk in terms of one broad brush of regulation that's going to address everybody, to my mind, doesn't work, right? Because I think the retail financing NBFCs, which are essentially asset financing NBFCs, are a very, very different kettle of fish from, let's say, people who are financing real estate or
Absolutely.
people who are doing wholesale lending of 20, 30 crores per exposure. That is a very different NBFC from the one who is financing a three-wheeler or a four-wheeler or a truck or a motorcycle, right? These two are not the same risk, and therefore they cannot have the same regulation. And for people who look at both these entities as all being NBFC, that clearly is a problem. And I think many of our regulations, many of the norms that we've put in place are not effective because of this, because
Absolutely.
we are
Indeed.
tending to treat this entire thing as one homogeneous lot, which it is not.
Yeah. So I think one size fits all and everything doesn't matter, right? Absolutely.
Completely,
Right.
completely.
And final question on the norms part, sir. Now with that, we have a new proposed, discussion paper which RBI has put up on, what they're going to do, a graded regulation based on size. Do you think this would be a good step going ahead, especially what we foresee coming in the future?
I, it partly addresses what I said just a minute ago in terms of, separating out the different types of risk. But this one doesn't do that. It's just going by largely size, right?
Mhm,
It
mhm.
says, small, medium, large in whatever nomenclature, but essentially it's going by size. And I don't think size alone should be the basis for this segregation. As I said, if it can be little more segregated based on risk profile, on asset profiles, that would perhaps be more desirable. But in the absence of anything else, at least some, layering is being thought of. I don't have a problem personally with it. I would be more keen to see, and I suppose, we'll cover that later during our chat. I would be more keen to see what regulators or the government or the powers that be will do to support the NBFC sector, and especially the smaller and medium companies. That to me is a more important part of this conversation. I mean, if they want to do layering and if they say we want to regulate the larger companies more tightly, I suppose that's fair enough. I don't think anyone has a problem with that. But as I say, that is addressing one part.
Thank you. So now I think let's move on to the B, that is the background or the history. And I think perhaps being if I can safely call you a veteran in the sector, now that you're, I think, on the verge of your officially announced retirement, and having spent a career in this sector, how have you seen the sector evolve from the good old times till date, and why do you think the sector could not only survive but has really been, if I can say, has caught the eye of the individual borrowers in India?
Well, if I can give you a simple one-line answer, then one-line answer would be that NBFCs, as much as I dislike the nomenclature, whatever, hire purchase companies, we collectively, and I'm not talking about any one company here, collectively as hire purchase companies, NBFCs, whatever, we were the guys who actually were the authors of what today is fashionably called financial inclusion.
Right.
Right? Back in the day, this jargon did not exist, but financial inclusion was actually, if I can be immodest, I would say it is the NBFCs who wrote the book on financial
Hmm.
inclusion.
Mm.
because we took credit to the guy, who knew nothing about credit, right? The guy couldn't produce a piece of paper to save his life. Forget about cash flows and ratios. He couldn't produce a bank passbook, right? And yet we went and lent to these guys, right? We trusted them based on their honesty, their ability to work hard, so on and so forth. And all of us, anybody who's been in the NBFC sector will give you thousands of stories of how a guy with just a shirt on his back 30 years ago today owns 100 trucks, or who owns a small scale unit or a factory or whatever. And the major and today again MSME is so much in focus. Many of today's MSMEs, right, are people who grew up, who succeeded and prospered because of what the NBFC sector did for them, because of what the small finance companies offered them when they were really struggling.
Absolutely.
The good thing is that, because of this, they grew. Now they have credibility, they have a credit score, all of that. So now they can go to a bank and the bank will happily look at them and say, oh, your credit score is 750. Of course, we'll give you money. But 20 years ago, there was nothing called credit score. There was nothing called balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, nothing. But we lend to these guys, right? And which is why I say with justifiable pride that we, the NBFC sector, wrote the book on financial inclusion. And I think that is probably the biggest contribution we've made to our country and to our economy.
So taking cue from what you just said, sir, as you said, rightly that we reached out, NBFC sector reached out to the person who could never have imagined about credit. So what do you think is the key or the mantra which attracted and still attracts these kind of people to NBFCs? Very well knowing, I mean, today I'm sure even an individual in remote part of the country at least is aware that if he borrows from an NBFC, it is going to cost him a bit more as compared to a bank. So what is it that it attracts him to NBFCs?
Well, it's a number of things, I think. Number one is access, right? NBFCs are far more easily accessible. NBFCs are far more flexible. NBFCs' speed of response is far quicker. You're right, the rates are higher, but I think the NBFCs are often able to look beyond structured formats, right? What I said earlier, I mean, in Hindi you would say matha dekh ke, and we have equivalents in every regional language. In Tamil, we say Nethiyapat, which means the same thing. You look at a guy's forehead and decide that he's credit worthy. So I think it is the combination of these things. And also, the thing is, as NBFCs, we know we lend in areas and communities where our knowledge of the people, the culture, the overall mahol is very good. So even when there is stress, if we know that the stress is because of genuine reasons, we'll give him that extra time, right? We'll say, you're not able to pay this month, never mind. We'll give you 2 months more. I mean, today people talk of moratorium, this, that, but in practice, we have always allowed people to, sort of defer their payments by a month or two. He knows that, we will not seize his truck or we will not send him a legal notice, because there is that basic trust between, the lender and borrower, right? So these are, I think, some of the things which have brought borrowers to NBFCs, even though, as you say, they could have got money cheaper from the bank.
Yes, I think it's that humane angle which comes into.
Correct.
Absolutely. And now this brings me to another, and I know this is something which has been very, very close to your heart, and you've been voicing it again and again. Lately, NBFCs are being called what we know known in the West as the shadow banks. Now, I know. I mean, so I think I would like you to share your thoughts. I mean, why and how do you think this term came to be coined, and how far is it justified to be, for NBFCs to be called as shadow banks?
Yeah, this shadow bank is one of those unfortunate importations from the West, as you said, along with a lot of the regulatory stuff which came from the West. The shadow bank business also came. I don't know what its origins are, and I don't really care. But I think we do our NBFCs a great disservice, because unfortunately, the English language is what it is. So the line between shadow and shady is a very thin one. And I think people very quickly sort of use shadow bank to almost as a proxy to say shady bank, which I think is not only repugnant, I think it's grossly unfair. Because on the one hand, if you read the Reserve Bank of India's trends in banking, which they put out every year, there's always 2 paragraphs where they talk glowingly about what the NBFC sector has done, for the economy and for the unbanked sector, so on and so forth. Similarly, the government has often taken note of the role of the important and pivotal role that NBFCs play in last mile credit delivery. With all of that, then the shadow banking thing. But shadow banking, I think, to be fair, is something that I would address more to the media, right? Because I think the regulators, and I remember in one of our interactions with the RBI at the senior most level, I had actually made a plea to the governor saying, sir, can we please stop using this terminology? And I think the Reserve Bank no longer uses, though they used to in the past, they no longer use that. But I think this is really more the media who should shun using this, because this regulatory arbitrage which people talk about. I mean, yes, there was arbitrage at one time, but now, more and more as the harmonization has happened, there is nothing shadow anymore with the NBFCs. I can tell you, as a large NBFC, the level of regulation that we face and, the kind of supervision that we have, the offsite surveillance that goes on, is enormous. So where's the question of shadow? I think, so I think really, if there are media people listening to this, I would, fold my hands and say, please, stop. You're doing a disservice to a very important channel of financing that exists in the economy by calling us shadow banks. I think it's a lousy way to describe what is a very vibrant and vital sector. And just because there are one or two black sheep to tar everybody from the same brush, I think is terrible. Because that way, in very recent memory, you've had banks which have failed. Right? So what are you calling them? Right? Banks, of course, have safety net and MyBAP and all of that. But with all the regulation in place, they have also failed. No?
Yeah. Right. So I think you talked about your company, and I think that brings me to the next question, which I personally really would like to know from you. See, so you are today heading an NBFC, Sundaram Finance, which I know is undoubtedly one of the most respected and is a very well sound NBFC, which has been running, I think, for how many years now? I think you would be, and we've seen the company never being running around top lines, if I'm correct. So I would like to know from you, because I know you've really spent a large part of your career in this esteemed organization. What is the genesis? What is the mantra there, which I think it's not only for NBFCs, I think it perhaps is an example for the entire corporate sector in India today.
Yeah, fair question, Raman, but let me answer your factual question. Sundaram Finance is a 66-year-old company, right? It's a few months older than me, actually. So 66 years old. Yeah, we started in 1954. So this is our 67th year, actually. Now, coming to the core philosophy of Sundaram Finance, our visionary founder, Mr. T.S. Santhanam, he actually set up this company based on requests from customers, right? Because the larger group used to be in automobile dealership. We used to do insurance. We used to have workshops for automobiles, all of that. The only piece in that was missing was finance. So apparently one of our customers at that time came and said, Mr. Santhanam, you are providing so many services to truck operators and bus operators. Why are you not extending finance? And apparently that's how he said, I must respond to my customers' need. And so this company started. Why I'm narrating this is to sort of lay down the basic tenet See, today people talk about, customer delight and customer ecstasy and CRM and all of that, a lot of jargon today. But I think back in the 50s, he recognized that actually the guy who's the most important in this whole chain is the customer. Everything starts with the customer. And I've heard him say that, guys, whatever you do, please don't forget the customer pays your salary and my salary. He used to include himself also. That customer is actually your annadata. And therefore, I think everything that we've done over these nearly 7 decades is essentially keep the center, the customer as the center, as the focal point of our business. And around that, everything that we do and we continue to do is saying, how do we make the customer experience really unique? What we call the Sundaram experience, right? That's something that all my entire team is very proud of, which is basically uh, established on the basis of transparency, of service, of trust, right? And of what I talked about earlier, accessibility, flexibility. You have to be there for your customer when he most needs you. It shouldn't be the other way around, right?
Yeah.
That's number one. Number two, I think we are also a deposit taking entity. And again, something very fundamental to our belief is that we are we are first and foremost custodians of public money and public trust. I would say the order should be we are first custodians of public trust, then custodians of public money. So all the actions, therefore, that we take are based on this fundamental premise. If you're a custodian, then that automatically entails certain types of behaviors, right? Which is what we have tried, and we try every day to follow in all our words, in our actions, behave truly like custodians of the enormous trust which people have placed in us, right? And therefore, arising out of all of this, top line chasing then clearly cannot be the single point agenda. So, what we follow, what the mantra, if you like, in Sundaram Finance is something called GQP, which is growth, quality, profitability. It is sort of the Trimurti, if you like, of our business. And what that is essentially saying is growth alone doesn't get you anywhere. If it is not accompanied by quality, if it is not accompanied by profitability, that growth is pointless. So, of course, growth is very important. All of us need to grow, but it should be growth which goes with quality and profitability. Then that virtuous cycle, that Trimurti of GQP is what then sustains you through good times, bad times, troubled times, crises, whatever. And probably that's the reason why we have navigated through so many crises, regulatory changes, global financial crisis, COVID, whatever. I think, it is some of these fundamental beliefs and fundamental philosophies which I think have helped us navigate, these turbulences.
No, I
I
think
know it's a long answer to your question, but
no, I think absolutely worth it. And I would not be wrong to say that if this GQP formula is to become the ethics of the corporate world, it will do a world of good to the GDP of the country also. So thank you for that, so that perspective, sir. So moving on to the next part on the F, that is the future. Now, we've seen, the Honorable Prime Minister has talked about his vision of an Atmanirbhar Bharat. He's also talking about India becoming a $5 trillion economy, which to some critics sound, very ambitious. But I think as Indians, we feel it is very much doable. Now, in this entire talk about if an Atmanirbhar Bharat or India, if a $5 trillion economy, where do you see NBFCs fitting in the next 5 or 10 years?
I think NBFCs have a very, very, very important role to play in this, India story, if for want of a better name, Atmanirbhar Bharat, 5 trillion, India story, whatever you want to call it. I think NBFCs, as I said, in the financial inclusion journey, though from the government's point of view, it's only 10 or 15 years old, we have been on this financial inclusion journey for the last 70, 80 years, right? And that has to continue. And I would say in many ways, the growth, the birth and the growth of MFIs to that extent has been another great step forward, because MFIs are an extension, a logical extension of what NBFCs have been doing.
Right.
But they have gone one step further, right? Because as NBFCs, as hire purchase companies, we were still very asset focused, right? We were asset based lenders. We still predominantly are asset based lenders. But MFIs have gone one step beyond. They do unsecured lending, small ticket lending, and through this phenomenal network of self help groups and so on, they have sort of stretched the boundaries dramatically, right? And now, with the advent of new technologies, digital, this, that, and the other, I think the reach of both MFIs but also NBFCs like ourselves will only grow, because while we take great pride in everything that we've done over the past decades and all the things that MFIs have done, what remains to be done is still huge, right? What remains to be done is still enormous. And, in this context, I mean, pardon me if I'm digressing, but, people often talk about this A versus B. I don't think there is an A versus B. I think it is and. Banks have a phenomenal role to play, because only banks can do the things that they are doing, right? But there are certain things which only NBFCs can do. There are certain things which only MFIs can do. And I think it should be a logical continuum of banks, big NBFCs, small NBFCs, MFIs. And if there is some new mechanism which comes up beyond MFI tomorrow, that too. Because I think given the size, given the diversity, and given the intricacies of this great, huge country, I think there is not only room, there is a need for different types of instrumentalities, different types of channels to deliver credit and to achieve this Atmanirbhar Bharat dream. So I would say NBFCs are more relevant than they've ever been.
Right. You touched upon the aspect of technology, and I think fintech story is another a very very talked about and very in thing today, and that is where people talk about the next growth really coming in. On the same side, we are also looking at, we are faced talking about certain wrongdoings being reported in the concept, especially in this concept of digital lending happening through the mobile apps. So what do you think, sir, is the way out, the way forward in terms of the fintech story versus some of these unethical practices creeping in versus the need for NBFCs also to adapt to the new technology?
Yeah, I think it's a fair question, Raman, and a question which is being asked more and more often these days. And my view on this has consistently been, I mean, even when technology sort of came in a big way in the early part of this millennium, see, I don't think it's ever going to be completely this or that, right? I think many things will coexist side by side. Fintech is certainly one of them, right? And I just pick up on a statistic which I heard from a friend recently. Amazon is this great big success story, right? I mean, Amazon has taken over the mind spaces of everybody, young, old, rich, poor, literate, illiterate, gaon. There's nobody who doesn't know Amazon, right? And this is globally the case. But what I'm told is in the US, I believe of all the consumer trade that happens, only 6% is online. So I think we need to have a sense of proportion in all of these things. And my own view and what we've practiced in our company is that whether it's technology, whether it's digital, whether it's fintech, whether it's AI, machine learning, and all of these are very valid new concepts that have come up. But I see all of these things as enablers, right? I don't see that this will replace that or either this or that. I think again, as I said, with banks, NBFC, MFI, whatever being a continuum, this also can be a continuum, right? But I I honestly don't see that somebody is going to, or one class of entities will die because this has come in. I honestly don't see that. I could be wrong. 10 years out, 20 years out, how things will change. I don't know. But for my money, I don't see people talk about disruption, and yeah, there is disruption as long as it is positive disruption. If it pushes us to become more if it pushes us to be more nimble, more innovative, all of that is very welcome, because I don't think any of us should be resting on our horse, right? So if we get more fleet-footed, and if we can respond quicker to the environment, to our customers, brilliant. But I think we shouldn't make the mistake of saying, oh, this new thing has come, fintech has come, so all traditional modes are going to die. I'm not able to sign up for that.
Right. Thank you. So I think now we'll move on to the last part of the discussion, which is on the C part of the NBFC, that is the challenges forward seen. Now, NBFCs we've seen, and we've seen a lot of phases where NBFCs have faced challenges, a lot of challenges, whether it was the 797 crisis, the global crisis, and we saw the recent crisis. How do you think the recent COVID-driven crisis was different from the ones we faced in the past?
I think just in terms of the scale, Raman, I think this crisis spared nobody, right? Tiny, small, medium, large, ultra large, mega, whatever you want to call it, nobody was spared. So it hit everyone across the board. So that way, I think it's a crisis like no other.
So then, what do you see, sir? What is your view of how NBFCs would be able to overcome this crisis, or we could see some real serious fallouts or failures happening?
Yeah, no, I see. I would believe, and I don't know if it's too soon, but yeah, we're almost now 12 months from the beginning of the crisis. I would say, as a sector, we have coped rather well, as we have, in many other earlier instances. We've coped very well this time as well. Yes, we've all been squeezed, we've been challenged, all of that has happened. But I must here hasten to add that, unlike on previous occasions, the kind of support that we've got from the Government of India and the Reserve Bank has been very, very solid. Right? In the past, we've often had reason to complain, saying that we didn't get support. But this time, I think, to be perfectly honest and perfectly fair, I think there was constant dialogue between the trade body, FIDC in this case, with the ministry, with the Reserve Bank, and I think they were both extremely receptive. I mean, whether it was GECL or whether it was TLTRO, across the board, I think the support that we got was very good. So that also helped in some measure for companies to tide over this crisis. But overall, I would say, as an industry, as a sector, we have come out of this, much better than we might have expected, or much better than what we had feared at the start of the crisis.
Good. So one challenge which we've seen and time and again, and not only this time, we see this as kind of becoming a perpetual problem now, is this whole issue of liquidity or fund availability for especially a very large number of small NBFCs.
Okay.
So what do you think is the answer to this? Where lies the solution, a kind of a permanent solution if it has to be?
Yeah, no, which is why, at the beginning I said, we'll probably talk about this later. This, to me, is probably the most critical issue which, has to be addressed by the powers that be, whether it's the Reserve Bank or the government. And you know this, we've talked about this forever and ever, about a funding mechanism for especially the small and medium NBFCs. What now strikes me is, with this four-tier layering which the Reserve Bank has now come out with, where they're saying, the overwhelming majority of companies will be in the whatever
base level.
base level, correct.
Yeah.
So if that is the case, and I think there's 9,700 companies or something
Yes.
in that base level, uh, and I would sort of automatically presume that those 9,700 companies would be of a size smaller than 500 crores
Yeah.
in terms of book size, right? So my suggestion would be that the government sets up a funding agency, like we have the National Housing Bank, for example, for HFCs. Now you have 9,700, whatever is the number, which are registered NBFCs, right, which are considered base level. So set up a funding agency which will only address the needs of these 9,700, who are really the engines of financial inclusion. They are often left out completely. They are cut out of mostly bank credit. They are completely cut out of capital markets. So for them alone, and I stress this, so it shouldn't be that the large companies come and grab the lion's share. So I'm saying keep the large companies out. So only companies who are up to 500 crores, up to 1,000, I don't know what the number should be, but of that order. So anyone who is smaller than that size should be eligible to go to this, agency, whatever it's called. We'll think of a name for
So you're
it.
suggesting a dedicated agency for this?
Yeah, like a National Housing Bank, let's say a National NBFC Bank, right? For want of a better, we'll come up with a better name, but right? But a dedicated funding agency which understands, right? The NHB, their advantage is they understand the housing sector, right? So they understand the risks, they understand the opportunities. The people who run this institution can be people who come with the relevant experience, right? To be able to evaluate NBFCs, how they work, what is the kind of risk. Because also to an earlier point, Raman, about the failures, if you look at the failures in the NBFC sector, they were not these small retail financing companies that failed. The ones that failed are these big ones who took uncommercial risks, right? They took real estate exposures, or they took imprudent exposures. The guy who finances trucks and three-wheelers and cars hardly ever gets into this kind of jam. And even in the Basel Convention, they recognize this. If you have spread of risk, the risk weight comes down.
No.
So even for banks, for their retail lending, the capital allocation is lower because there is diversification of risk. And with the small NBFCs, that's what you get. Because there will be no small NBFC which will finance more than one vehicle per borrower. Maximum, they will finance two. End of story. Right? So the spread of risk is phenomenal, and therefore I think it's very safe to say that a dedicated funding agency to take care of the needs of the small NBFCs or base level NBFCs, if that's the new language, I think that would be the answer that we've all been looking for.
And I think your important point is that that agency itself should be run by people who understand the business. I think that'll be a very, very critical point. Absolutely. Finally, sir, the final question I think is something which is, I can say, the talk of the town these days is this whole discussion about large NBFCs converting to banks. Now, do you see, I sometimes feel the way things are projected is that we are talking of providing some kind of an ultimate goal to NBFCs, that is, okay, the final goal is to convert into a bank. Once you become, say, X size, you should convert to a bank. Do you think is that the proposition? And how far is it justifiable or attractive? So even if I may ask you, for example, tomorrow, do you see Sundaram Finance becoming a bank one day?
Let me answer the wider question first. I don't think, becoming a bank is nirvana, right? It is not the ultimate panacea for everything. As we all know, there are whatever number of banks in this country. Not everyone is wildly successful. Yeah, there are some great banks, right, who are extremely well run, or extremely profitable, all of that. But we also have a large number of banks which are not, right? And I don't want to take names or anything. Recently, we've had bank failures, right?
Mhm.
So it's not, I mean, there's no, a bank does not guarantee anything automatically. Whether it is a bank or an NBFC or any other organization, there has to be good governance, there has to be good practices that people follow in management. And without that, just changing the label from this to that, to me, is not the answer. That's number one. Number two, I think to presuppose or presume that everybody is dying to become a bank is also wrong. I don't think everybody is dying to become a bank, right? Because there are other ways of functioning, other ways of delivering credit to chosen segments. And if you NBFCs are a classic example, we understand retail finance very well. We understand vehicle finance very well, but we don't understand foreign exchange. We don't understand guarantees and letters of credit and what have you, right? So why should we go and do things which we don't know or which we don't understand? I would much rather that we concentrated on the things where we have built decades long expertise, right? And do this better and better rather than go and become a bank just because I have this false sense of, oh, I'll have some great status. Or as people argue, oh, you will have access to CASA. Now, this is the biggest myth, right? Everybody doesn't get CASA, right? So, to my mind, yeah, it's good that people should have the flexibility. So, there's a transparent sort of set of rules. So, if ABC, NBFC has an aspiration to become a bank, let them then go down that path if they meet all the criteria which RBI has laid down, and if they have, the fit and proper, as they say, and if they can find the capital, by all means, they should. But if there are others who say, no, thank you very much, I'm happy being this NBFC, I'm happy financing what I finance, I think we should leave them alone. I am certainly not one who votes for bank is the answer or nirvana for everything. I don't think so. And last, your question, which is, does Sundaram Finance have banking aspirations? The answer is no. We have evaluated this. Every time, there was this universal bank license and on-tap license, this, that, and the other. It's not that we didn't look at it. Of course, we looked at it, we evaluated it, but in the opinion of our board, it didn't make sense. So we, as I said, we were happy, we are happy, continuing to do what we think we know well, what we understand well, and we will try to become better and better at the things that we know. So that is kind of the future outlook.
No, I think that at least is good news for the NBFC sector, because I don't think NBFC sector would like to afford to lose Sundaram Finance as one of the key players. So we want you very much to be there. So thank you, sir, with this all perspective and sparing your time. So if I was to sum up the whole discussion we had today, I think very rightly put, you've talked about that NBFCs were the ones who actually wrote the book on financial inclusion. And that is something where this whole story of inclusion started. And I think that is a point well made. On the norm side, I think once again, you were spot on when you said that quite a few times we find that the regulation for the sake of it tend to be a borrowed set of regulations which may not actually fit in the Indian context. So to say, to Indianize that aspect is something which really needs to be looked at. And to the issue of the perpetual problem of small NBFCs facing, I think once again, your suggestion of having a dedicated financing body, that to run by people who understand the nuances of this business, would be the answer. And finally, yes, conversion of NBFC to bank is not attaining nirvana. I think that sends the message loud and clear. But sir, I can tell you that your thoughts and your views today have at least helped us in the road towards achieving nirvana, in terms of the understanding of the nuances of not only the financial sector, but specifically NBFCs. And I'm sure viewers would really benefit from all these. Thank you once again for sparing your valuable time. It was such a pleasure, as always, talking